Thank you for allowing me into your home. This is our third video on health and wellness principles. We started with oxygen, and I wasn't happy with the first one, so I did an addendum. If you haven't watched it, you can go back on Dr. Patricia's channel and pick that up. This one is on hydration or water, and the next one is on nutrition. So I want to get into this a little bit with you, but first let me tell you, if you don't know who I am, my name is Will Green. I'm Dr. Patricia's husband. And previously I was president of a medical corporation seeking approvals for Eastern European medical devices using quantum physics. I had the honor of working with Professor Sergei Sitko, who was one of the top nuclear physicists in the world. And he restored my hearing in my deaf ear 30 years ago with a device that used quantum physics. So that's a little bit of my background. We're going to be talking about water, and water is probably the second most important thing in our wellness protocol. First is oxygen. We can't live without oxygen very long, or everything breaks down and deteriorates and we're done. But we can live without water for a long time. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I've been in research now for 40, 50 years. And I'm observant because science is observation. And there were these two young Irishmen over in Ireland that were arrested by the British government, and they went on a hunger strike. And they were young, strapping, healthy young men. And they went on a hunger strike with no food and no water. On day 20 and 21, they were blind. On day 30 and 31, they were deceased. So how long can you live without water? You can live a long time without water, but you can't be healthy without water. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. So let me tell you something that is a fundamental. We're 70% liquid. It means our body is 70% water. Our blood is 90% water, as is our lymph cells. Now, there are two cells in our lymph and blood system that are the same cell that go between the two systems. The first one is leukocytes, which is red blood cells, and the second one is lymphocytes, which are lymph cells. And as the red blood cells leak out of the capillaries into the lymph system, they carry the nutrients and things to our cells and carry off the waste. They go out back through our thoracic duct, back up into our clavicle veins, and they go back into our red blood system. So if our body is 70% liquid, and 80% of that liquid is lymphocytes and leukocytes, that means we're 56% those cells, the lymphocytes and the leukocytes. So if we're 56% of 80%, that means we're over 48% of those cells in our whole being. That means almost half of our being is those two cells. Those cells are pretty daggum important, don't you think? So it was 1961 when Dr. Arthur Guyton first started studying the lymph system. And I was fortunate enough to study with Dr. Samuel West, who was probably the top lymphologist in the world prior to his passing. And I learned a lot about lymph. But what I learned was that when my family arrived here on the Mayflower, and two of my ancestors arrived on the Mayflower, and they were the children of two families, and they got married, and so my family's been around here since the Mayflower, and we landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and the Native Americans talked to us about the two blood systems, the red blood system and the clear blood system. And it took us till 1961 to begin studying the lymph system. And the lymph system is probably, secondly, the second most important system in our whole being. But we didn't study it because the pharmaceutical industry was not interested in it, and it was at Walter Reed Hospital at the Department of Defense did the studies. So now we know a lot about the lymph system. Now, here's what we didn't know, and what I'm hoping to reveal to you, and the importance of water in your system is that the lymph system is what the lymph cells are the ones that carry oxygen, nutrients, and things to the cells, and they deliver it to the cells, and then they pick up the waste out of the cells and they carry it back into our red blood system, and it goes back into our clavicle veins, and it gets cleansed and cleaned, and a lot of it leaves our system. Now, people don't realize why our fecal matter is brown, because the majority of our fecal matter is dead blood cells. And as you know, when you get blood on something and it oxidizes, it turns brown. So we're going to talk a lot about the basics, the fundamentals, because if you master the fundamentals, you can master just about everything. So what's water? What is water? Water is a molecule that is made up of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. And so we put water in our body, and we assimilate it, we digest it, we take it in to use it, and our body breaks it down into hydrogen and oxygen. Now, we talked a little bit on the last video about ozone, and ozone is 3 atoms of oxygen instead of 2. So it's 3 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. So it's O3, not O2. So our body separates everything that we put in it and uses it in its finite single cell use. So seawater, for example, we think about seawater being water, but seawater is actually 96.5% water, and everything else is the stuff that's in the water. The chemical formula for H2O, as I just said, is two elements of hydrogen and 1 element of oxygen. So the oxygen molecule is actually 3 atoms. The two hydrogen atoms are attached to 1 oxygen atom, which makes a water molecule. A single drop of water can contain billions of molecules. Substances easily dissolve or mix with liquid water, which is why water sustains life. We think about, water as a solvent, and water has a certain density, a certain adhesion in its liquid state, but it changes as it gets colder. And the colder it gets, the further the molecules separate. There's billions of atoms in a water molecule, and so as the molecules separate and they get further apart and they become less dense, they get lighter. And as they get lighter, guess what happens? Well, you know what happens with ice. You know the story of the iceberg. 1/4 of it's above the water level and 3/4 of it's underwater. Well, why is it on the top of the water? Because it's not as dense as liquid water, and so it floats. Basically, water is tasteless and colorless, pure water. So what is pure water? Well, pure water is pure water. And how do you get pure water? Well, chemists can take oxygen and hydrogen and put it together and create water. And it doesn't have anything in it. Now, for a lot of years, for 40 plus years, all that I've put in my body is purified or distilled water. Well, people say, well, you can't do that because where do you get your minerals from? Well, a friend of mine got his PhD and became the top scientist at a well-known company in Massachusetts, and he sent me a copy of his thesis for his doctorate, and I got something from it. What I got from it is that the molecular structure of an item like iron or copper or whatever, it's the same whether it's a rock or whether it's a plant. So iron can have two structures. Iron can be rock or iron can be plant. Well, we can't assimilate rock because rock can't elongate and fit into our cells. So what happens to the rock minerals in our body? Well, you've heard of arthritis. Well, my mother, when she was in her 80s, she came to me and she had her hands all twisted up. And she had this, what they had diagnosed her with. And I said, Mom, let's get rid of that. So I got my mom drinking distilled water at 80, and within 2 weeks her hands were back to normal. And what happened? Well, all the rock minerals like the calcium and the iron and things were lodged in her joints and made her joints stiff. So when she drank the distilled water, because water is a solvent, it flushed those things out of her joints. And so at 80, all of a sudden, she had her mobility back. Well, I had lots of clients that came into my office when I was in practice. And I had one lady who was interesting. Her husband carried her into the office. And she had a severe case of locked up joints. That's what I'll call them, locked up joints. So I got him to go to the store and buy distilled water. A week later, she came back to my office and she walked in. Well, if you know anybody that's got joints that are stuck and bulging and don't work really well, the secret is to flush out the rock minerals out of those joints. Well, I mean, I've had medical doctors threaten to sue me for putting this stuff out because they don't understand it at all. And hey, listen, I'm not the brightest light in the tunnel, but I've got years and years of experience. And I've worked with some of the greatest minds on the planet. And so here's what I know. If you take a mineral and you put it in a plant form, which is technically it says it's a chelated mineral. It's been chelated by the plant. The plant has assimilated the rock, and they turn the rock into plant mineral. And you take that mineral and you want to squeeze it in the little opening in a cell. It can elongate and squeeze into the cell. A rock can't do that. It gets stuck in the tissue. So Hippocrates wrote that people that drank cistern water were healthy. People that drank groundwater were unhealthy. What was cistern water? Well, cistern water was rainwater. Now, you can't drink it today because mankind has polluted our atmosphere so badly. But back, 2,000 years ago, people drank rainwater. I mean, it was clean water. And what is rainwater? Rainwater is distilled water. And you can see the water in the sun. You can see the water being drawn up to the clouds by the sun. You can see just lines and lines of water being drawn up to the sun as it heats and turns into steam, or that steam state, and it goes up into the clouds and then comes back down on top of us again. Well, the secret of my health, and listen, I can't wait to be 80. I mean, I'm so excited about turning 80. I've still got a year and a half, a little less than a year and a half to go. But man, I can't wait to be 80 because, Moses got started when he was 80. If it's good enough for Moses, it's good enough for me. But I want to be as healthy as a 40-year-old when I'm 80. So how am I going to stay healthy? Well, I have to keep myself pretty much cleaned out. Now, the next video is going to be on nutrition, but I'm going to give you a couple excerpts from that. Our liver has to process fructose. Refined sugar is sucrose and fructose. Our liver can't process fructose. So I don't eat refined sugar. I don't put it in my system. I certainly don't eat high fructose corn syrup because I want to keep my liver clean, because my liver's got a lot of work to do. And, when people that know me know that 50 years ago I was a drunk, drinking 2 fists of liquor every day. And my liver took a beating. Well, it's had 50 years to regenerate and clean up. The liver is the only thing in the body that can regrow. If 90% of our liver is shot, we can regrow it. We can regrow the other 90% and get it back. Well, that's pretty exciting. So what we put in our body determines how our body works. Well, if we put something in our body that allows it to work properly, then that's a great thing. But if we don't, then we have to pay the consequences. So what are the unique properties of water? Number one, water is polar. Water is an excellent solvent, has high heat capacity. Water has high heat of vaporization, being vaporized, turning into steam. Water has cohesive and adhesive properties, and water is less dense as a solid than a liquid. At room temperature, water is viscose, it's liquid. So, and room temperature is probably the healthiest water that we can ingest. Now, personally, I like cold water. But cold water drops right to the bottom of our stomach and goes right back right into our intestine, where warm water stays in our system a little bit longer. Water's extensive capability to dissolve a variety of molecules has earned it the designation of the universal solvent. Well, water is a cleaning agent. Well, one of the things that I do, and I'm not connected to any of the businesses or companies I'm talking to you about, because if I were, I would be practicing medicine without a license. But years ago, when I was a boy, when I was 13, I had yellow jaundice. And once you've had yellow jaundice, uric acid builds up in your tissue. Well, when I was in my 20s, every time I would perspire, it would smell like I had urinated myself. And I was very frustrated with that. But hey, listen, I've been doing research for years. And I heard about a product on the West Coast that was developed for Arabian horses. And the product was called BioWater. And if you go to biowater.com, you can find the product. And you put 1 ounce of this product in a gallon of distilled water, and it makes the water wetter. Well, what makes water wetter? Well, you have to relax the surface tension of the water molecule. And if you relax the surface tension, then the water can get in places that it couldn't get before. Remember we talked about how nutrition goes into the cells? Well, BioWater turns water into a surfactant, a wetting agent, and it does more. So I got a hold of some of this stuff and I started drinking it, and I was drinking it all day long. I was drinking it by the gallons. And the company got furious with me. They said, "You can't do that." Well, I did that. And with just a short period of time, all the uric acid was flushed out of my body. And when I perspired, I smelled like a guy. I didn't smell like a baby that was urinating. And that was huge for me. Well, even today, every morning when I take my nutrition, which we're going to talk about next video, I take it with a glass of BioWater, and I make it up by a gallon. I keep a gallon jug in the refrigerator, and I start my day with 18 ounces of BioWater, and I use it to take my nutrition because it makes my nutrition assimilate or get into my cells more easily and faster. So just a tip. But getting back to water, dehydration is the biggest problem I have with the elderly. Now I've got clients in their 90s, and my goal is to get them youthful again. And what is the problem that they have? Well, number one, I have to teach them how to breathe. And you really need to understand that. This is the very base foundation of this whole teaching. You have to completely empty your lungs so they're completely empty so they can completely fill. So you're transferring that space. You're taking that space in your lungs. Those little alveoli in there, they want to take the oxygen out of the air and transfer it into the bloodstream. Well, they want all the air they can get to get all the oxygen they can get. So we start out, so the first thing I teach my elderly clients, I had one client, she was 95. She was amazing. I taught her how to take care of herself, and I got her to buy a mini trampoline. And she would jump on the trampoline 60 times, 3 times a day. And she just got healthier and healthier and healthier. And then she got in a car wreck with her boyfriend, who was 96, and she ended up breaking her hips, broke her hip, and she ended up being bedridden, and we lost her. But in the process, she started emptying her lungs. And she got healthier and healthier and healthier. And then she would work out on this mini trampoline. She was getting exercise. And then the hard part came. I had to get her to put enough fluid in her body to make her body work like it was supposed to. And the biggest challenge I have, now if you're over 40, you probably don't drink enough water. If you're over 60, you surely don't drink enough water. And if you're my age, hey, listen, I've got people, I call them up and I say, is the water boy calling? Because I'm impressing upon them the value that they have to have water in their system to make their water work, make their system work. If you don't have water, you don't have anything cleaning you. And what happens if you don't clean? What happens if you don't wash? Doesn't crud build up? Garbage and junk? I mean, it builds up. So you have to get it out. So how do you get it out? You put a solvent in your body and you start washing it out. So water goes up into the heavens, comes down in the clouds, comes back down on the ground. And when it comes back on the ground, what's it do? It does one of two things. It either goes back down into the sea or the ocean or the rivers or the lakes, or it goes into the ground. It goes one of those two places. Do we ever lose our water? No. We have the same water in our atmosphere that we had 1,000 years ago. But where is it now? The question is, where is it? And what have we done to it? Now, we could have putrefied it. Then we have to clean it. But it's still water. So it's still water. Now, your body needs enough water to have its processes work. So if you're not willing to drink water, drink fluid, well, we have a challenge. We have a challenge. You know, the chemistry of water wasn't discovered until 1731. I mean, we didn't know what water was, and now we know what it is. It's hydrogen and oxygen. So what does this water do? Well, you think about your spine a minute, and let's talk about some spinal processes. We have these little balloons between our vertebrae. They call them discs, okay? And what are the discs full of? Well, the discs they're 5 layers, like 5 layers of balloons, and they're full of lymph fluid. That's what's inside of them. And if we take care of them and they stay healthy, that's great. But if they start to dry out, guess what happens? The outside one cracks, the next one cracks, the next one cracks, and pretty soon we have a bulge in our disc because we don't have enough liquid in our body. And eventually the disc can break, and we call that a ruptured disc. How did we get that? Well, let's talk about veins in your legs. And the veins get big and ugly. They get dark. And I'm not going to name them because I'm not a doctor. I'm just a regular guy. And these veins get dark. Do you know why do we get them? From lack of circulation. Because in our hip, we have a muscle called the piriformis muscle that clamps down on the sciatic nerve and the artery in our legs. And when we don't get enough fluid in our legs, which is blood, they start to dry up and then they get dark. And we call them different kind of names. Well, you know how you get rid of those things? You drink more water. You fill your body up with water. You let the water do its job. The water is supplying your blood and your lymph with 90% of the fluidity, of the viscosity. And I hope I'm helping you some with this. Water carries a pH between 6.5 and 8.5. And if we drink alkaline water holds oxygen. Acid water doesn't hold oxygen. So what do we want? We want alkaline water. And here's what I do. Because now I've been drinking distilled water for 40 plus years. But I like to put something in it. So I go to the store and I buy 20, 30 pounds of lemons. And I have one of these presses that you squeeze the lemons in. And I squeeze those lemons and put those lemons in a gallon jug. And then I put 5 ounces of pure lemon, fresh lemon juice, in a gallon of water. And I add 70 drops of liquid stevia. And I get my stevia from Vitacost. Now, I don't have anything to do with any of these products. I don't sell lemons. I buy lemons at the grocery store, and I buy my new nutritional stevia from Vitacost as a liquid, and I put 70 drops of liquid in my gallon of water, and my gallon of water makes 7 mugs. The size mugs I use make 7 mugs of lemon water. Now, why lemon water? Because in lemon water is acid, but when it goes into your system, it turns alkaline. It gets broken down and turns alkaline, and so your body holds more oxygen. What's the most important thing? Oxygen. What's the next most important thing? Water. And if you don't have those two, there's a scripture which says, and I'm going to forget it now, and I'm just going to drop it. The deer panteth after the water brook. David said, the deer panteth after the water brook. Now it actually says the heart, and the King James, the heart panteth after the water brook. Why does the heart, which is a mature 5-year-old deer, pant after the water brook? Because if it doesn't get to the water, it's going to die. It has to get to the water if it wants to live. Well, we're the same way. If we learn that we have to get to the water, we start getting to the water when we have more life. Now, the word water is really interesting because it came from a Dutch word, a Saxon word, the root word. The root word of water is wet. Water is wet. What makes it wet? It's fluid. It's got a certain amount of adhesive properties, but it doesn't stick together. So it's wet. And what makes it wet? Because it's fluid, and that's why it's wet. So I hope I don't miss anything, because I really want you to get this. H2O is it a single or a double bond? The water oxygen is singly bonded to 2 hydrogen atoms. Why is the water blue in the ocean? Oh, that's really interesting. Do you know why we have blue oceans? Because the water absorbs colors in the red part of the light spectrum. Like a filter, this leaves behind colors in the blue part of the light spectrum for us to see. The ocean may also take on green, red, or other hues of light as it bounces off floating sediments in the water. Now, I had forgotten about that. But I've got like 11 pages of information here, and I really want to get it to you because I'm sure I'm not covering it well, because my wife is really good at reading stuff and putting it on. I'm not. I just have to talk to you, and I hope I get the bullet points. So we are, and I got something wrong already. We are 51.6% leukocytes and lymphocytes. This is over half our body. No wonder our blood is so important. What do the scriptures say about our blood? For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. Interestingly, when I originally started writing this, it was in Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the Jewish year, which is the Day of Atonement. And here I got to as the deer panteth after the water, as the heart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. So we have to have water. We have to have air. If we don't have water and we don't have air, we don't have life. Hydration is health. If you don't want to be all prune-faced and all dried up with full of wrinkles, what do you do? Hey, I've got my share of wrinkles. But what's interesting is my mother, who I took after my mother, she had that papery skin where she was all wrinkles, and she wouldn't drink enough water. I couldn't get her to drink enough water. So if you want to have smoother skin, you want to have youthful skin, one of the secrets is exhale completely and fill your body with oxygen and drink lots and lots and lots of water. Old unhealthy people dehydrate. They shrivel up and die. Now that's enough to wake you up. Old unhealthy people dehydrate. They shrivel up and die. Well, I think I've just about covered everything I wanted to cover. And if you have any questions, listen, I need all the questions I can get, because when people ask me questions, if I don't know the answer, I've got to go find it. And that's what research is go and finding it. So if you want a copy, if you want a copy of the script, which is a lot more thorough than what I just shared with you, drop me an email. My email address is right below the video, and I will be honored to send you a PDF on your email and give you whatever information I've got. So now we've talked about oxygen, we've talked about water, and the next week, a week from this week, we're going to start